Greetings, viewers. You are not seeing things, or at least you are not seeing a Parker 45. This is a Moonman Model 80, and it is quite literally almost an exact clone of a Parker 45. Parker 45 was a pen that Parker made for many, many years. Then they no longer make it, and this is a pen that Moonman makes in China that is, for all intents and purposes, the exact same pen as we will see as we walk through it piece by piece. So here we go. Let's start with the only thing that, well, one thing that might appear to be different that really isn't. So if you look on the end of the Moonman, it's got a metal end and it's just plain plastic on the Parker. Parker 45s originally, the older model Parker 45s had this exact metal finial. I do not have an older one. This one that I have is probably from the late 60s to early 1970s, so it doesn't have that end. So this is really more of a clone of an original Parker 45. This is a later model Parker 45. So although this might appear to be a difference between the Moonman and the Parker, it really isn't. The major substantive difference, and the only one really, is the design of the clip. The Moonman has a much more stylized clip with less detail on the arrow. You don't have detail on the arrowhead nor the fletching on the end of the arrow. It does not have detail on the Moonman. Beyond that, as we'll see as we walk through it piece by piece, the finials on the top, for example, are all virtually identical. The caps are both a brushed matte finish steel. The Moonman says Moonman in the exact same spot that Parker says Parker. Parker does have the model number 45 on it, whereas the Moonman does not. They both are pulled to uncap. The caps are interchangeable. They will work just fine on either pen. The barrel bands are identical. The dimensions of the barrel and the section are identical. When it comes to the business ends, the nibs are basically identical. The Moonman does have a small ventilation hole on the nib where the Parker does not. The nib units, these Parker 45s, let me get an uninked pen here to show you. These Parker 45s have a screw out interchangeable nib unit. The Moonman's screw out interchangeable nib unit is interchangeable with the nib units on the Parker 45. Both are cartridge converter filled pens, and the converters are compatible. You can put a Parker converter in the Moonman and vice versa. Similarly, the barrels and the sections are interchangeable. You can screw the Parker section on the Moonman pen and vice versa. So for all intents and purposes, like I said, we are pretty much dealing with a exact clone pen. And I have to be careful when I put these on because I want to make sure I put the right cap on the right pen because they are so similar. I forget sometimes. So that's basically what we're dealing with. In terms of weight, very, very similar. Parker 45, 15 grams. This particular Parker 45 is 15 grams. The Moonman is 17. I suspect the major differences in this metal piece on the end and maybe some slight design differences on the converter. Other than that, they probably would be the same amount of weight. They pretty much feel the same amount of weight if you hold them in your hand. Although they are quite thin pens, they are both fairly standard, traditionally sized pens. So here is the Moonman M80 and the Parker 45 compared to a Lamy Safari and a Pilot Metropolitan. You can see they're thin pens, but pretty much right in this ballpark in terms of size. So as you can see, we're dealing with two almost identical pens here, but the question remains, how do they write? Let's find that out right now. Okay, one thing that we're going to have to account for when comparing the writing on these is that the Parker has a medium nib and the Moonman has a fine nib, so let's just factor that in when we're looking at how they write. But here we go. We are writing here with a Moonman 80, and this is a fine hooded steel nib. And so this is quite smooth. Has some nice flow, etc. I'm not even going to bother to try to flex it because of a hooded nib like this. As you can imagine, you're not going to get any kind of flex at all, but it writes quite nicely, and pretty much has the same. If you're written with a Parker 45, it is pretty much the same experience that you would get on the Parker 45. So let's do some Parker 45 writing. We'll do that right next to it here. So this is a Parker 45, and this is a medium hooded steel nib. And this is also this is smooth as well. It feels a bit smoother, but that's really, to be honest, that's a medium versus a fine thing. Broader nib tends to be slightly smoother experience. That's generally the way these work. But this is really, to be honest with you, I think the experiences in writing are really basically the same. The one thing I will say, though, the Parker is definitely a wetter writer. Even factoring out the line width, it is definitely laying down more ink. This is the exact same ink in both pens, and this is clearly a more saturated writing than this is, factoring the line width out altogether. So this is definitely a wetter writer. I wouldn't say the Moonman is dry. It's just not as wet as the Parker is, but they both are pretty nice. So that is your Moonman versus your Parker. So if you're a fan of Parker 45s, you will like this Moonman. If you've always wanted a Parker 45 and can't seem to get one, which really shouldn't be a problem. These in the used market, these Parker 45s are really quite readily available. But if you just feel like having a new pen or something a little different, I shouldn't say something a little different because it's exactly the same, but you know what I mean. This is really quite an exact clone. It's really quite amazing, actually. So everything, like even the nib units, are interchangeable. It's really quite something. This is a pretty nice pen. So that, I think, is about it for this pen. Let's talk about this ink a little bit, shall we? This ink is Parker Quink Washable Blue. And this is a very standard blue ink, the kind of blue ink you might find in, sort of run-of-the-mill ballpoint pen, etc. Very standard blue ink from Parker. So this is what the bottle looks like. This has been this particular ink marketed under this name, although they have changed the formula a few times over the years. Has been available basically since like forever. So standard basic blue ink, kind of sort of flat, not much in the way of special effects, certainly no sheen, very minimal shading, if any. Very just basic, conservative blue ink. All right, let's see how washable it is. I'm gonna take the corner of this washcloth and I'm gonna expel some ink on it, and then let's see if I can wash it off. So we'll make a little bit of a mess here, and let's see. That's the before. Let me just take this over to the sink, and we'll see what we can do. Well, it did okay, not great. So again, I did not really let this set. I put the ink on it. I took it kind of right over the sink. I ran it under water for a while, used a little bit of soap on it, etc., and there is still a bit there. I suspect if I ran it through a laundry cycle with proper detergent and all that, it would probably mostly come out. But that was without giving it any time to dry in or set. So even though it says washable blue, I would be very, very, very careful about just being too cavalier with getting it on your clothes, etc. So it's probably better than most inks, but it's not like it's just gonna come right out. So be warned. Okay, I think that'll about do it for this video. As always, I thank you very, very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Keep those thumbs up coming. And as always, until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye.